Hello, folks. Hello, fellow subscribers. Welcome to another podcast for my channel, Cliff Rockafella. It's been a while. I'm just looking at my channel now, and it's been like something like 5 months or something. So, these things happen. The last few shows done with Jeremy sort of came to an end. I think they maybe weren't prepared for what we were going to get into. It's my gut feeling. But I'm pretty sure Jeremy's done a talk about why he did end that. And that was Divergence. So anyone want to check that out or previous shows that are on my channel? We went into some surface level scraping into the world matrix that we live in. So today we're taking a whole new approach. I've got some Discord friends with me, predominantly my co-speaker's OG. How's it going, OG?
I think I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah. And so by now we can assume that just about all of you listening are in some form of lockdown. As a lot of you know, I'm from New Zealand, and we are in lockdown here. I had no idea how deep that would be. There was a lot of vague communication through the media, as we know, and it's manifested into a lot of hypocrisy, in my opinion, this is actually why I thought to even a little bit of discussion on this, because for safety, which a lot of us do want to some degree, and a lot of us want some form of stability, but we still want our freedom, of course. Sometimes we have to make rules to balance everything out so everyone can carry on living with as much freedom as we have. I think that's the problem that we'll probably discuss a lot with this group. The whole concept of by living in a group of people called a society, how do we maximize freedoms? What are the red flags of taking that away? And it really comes down to a balance, I think. And so we'll be going into a lot of that stuff. So, yeah, we've got a whole other bunch of people here that'll probably chime in as well. So, is everyone here under a lockdown?
Yeah, I'm in the U.S. and my state has been locked down for some time. I still move when I want to. I've been ignoring it to some degree. I can see that coming to a stop at some point, right? They're going to either impose violence or extort me for doing what I see sensible in my day. And I mean, that it's scary to think about. However, I want to retain my autonomy, right? I wish to, with every fiber of my being, do as I see fit, given I'm not harming anyone doing so. And there's an argument to be made that my moving about readily is harming the population as a whole. And it seems to be valid to some degree. However, these ailments and the guise of what this lockdown is for seem to be more nefarious than they're leading on, right? I accept the fact that this illness has adverse effects on people. However, I don't know that it's as dangerous to the degree that media is portraying.
Yep. Over here, the latest statistics through the mainstream media is something like over 200 cases, probably up to 250 people including presumed, they say this now too, including presumed infection, which is, you'd have to go and look that up, but it's basically, it's not fully evidence that the person that has got this virus, it's just they've got symptoms or something. So there's not actually that many people even infected. There's been no deaths at all. And there's been something like 18 to 20 people recovered. So it seems to be, even if it is some sort of biological laboratory experiment, it seems to be obviously worse than your average flu. We have been getting a lot of bad flus, eh? I mean, a lot of you guys out there probably had them. I know I have. They last for longer, and then some could say, well, it's your age, and that's true. As you get older, it can get harder for you to combat some of these things. But it does just seem a bit extreme. It just seems a little bit extreme, and they could actually put in more. They're spending billions here. They've openly said we're spending billions in the direction of safety with this virus. So why not give everyone a mask? That's the other thing. And if you gave everyone a mask, then we could go out. If you get out of your car, you wear a mask. Okay, cool. Just things like that. I'm not saying that's the total way of dealing with it, but that's just another option. Give people options. The more choice we have, the more freedom we have. The less choice, less freedom.
Well, I mean, it's funny that you say, well, it's funny to me that you say they should just give people masks, right? Because the government doesn't have anything, right, that they haven't first stolen from the people. So if they're going to steal our liberties and steal from us anyway, is the argument that, well, you should be benevolent in some way and provide us with some PPE, seeing as you're already pretty much bending us over anyway, right?
Yeah, because I mean, you're kind of dusting on the whole concept of government in itself, which always flashes on for me when we talk about it, and we look at it as a corporate entity. A corporation has to sell its wares. It has to always sell its stuff. That's its whole idea. And the more crafty it can sell it, the better. And sometimes it's even applauded. So would it be true that even if people knew more about freedom, liberty, anarchy even, in a deep way, and what the state is, then would there be more anarchists, say, that don't cause violence for the newbies to all this? They'd think anarchy, oh my God. I'm talking about like non-violent anarchy, where people can live free without impinging on the rights of others or damaging other people. So if that was the case and people were educated, would there be people that form groups under a thing called a state? And I'd say yes. And then fast forwarding to our time where we've got a futuristic corporate setup, and if the education was there, would there be a state? Yes. And why? Because the corporations in this day and age are quite complex. Even if you took away a lot of the regulation, they're still quite complex, the machinery and the skills needed to run a big corporation. So if these corporations were making a profit and they were serving man, which is obviously the front, at least, that they're giving us, then would they, in a so-called government to keep them in check, because this is really what it was all about. It was the government, the futuristic government of today is meant to keep the corporations in check, not the individual. Going back to the whole concept of why we can do it. We can do this monolith because we believe people can still have their liberties. So it's obviously getting overreach and with deception and everything else. We know that. We know it for a fact. But would these groups of people forming corporations have a state government? Yes. So if they're serving the people, they being the corporations and the corporate government that governs them, wouldn't it be fair that they were to just give the people, including anarchists, masks if a thing came about? I'd say yes, because nobody's getting damaged. The corporation's making more than enough money, and the state taxes it, the entity, not the people. Then that's how I'd see it balancing out. So yes, it should be given to the people. Then everything can continue. Everyone's happy. Everyone's doing what they want to do. I mean, that's basically what people want. We want to do what we want to do. As an individual, you've all got purpose. And the conflict comes when other people complain about your path. Be it a private individual that reports to an entity that controls. You know what I mean? Like, say, for instance, you get a corporation, as an example of the way that these things manifest, you get a corporation that usually these days has a security guard. And they probably always have had some kind of security guard, even years ago, thousands of years ago, probably. You would have to have sort of security around a valuable asset that is quite, especially if it is serving a lot of people. It's an important asset, not just to the owners, but for the people in general.
Well, and I'm not familiar with the breadth of understanding of the word anarchy your audience may have. So before we move on to this concept of a corporation profiting off of giving something away, I think it pertinent that we touch on anarchism a little bit, because a lot of people have this preconceived notion that anarchists are violent and they're in the streets wearing all black and throwing bricks into storefronts. But I think we'd be remiss without clarifying what we as anarchists mean by anarchism. And to me, it all relies on the etymological breakdown of the word, right? Or anarchos, and being without, and archos being ruler, and it's just a level of freedom that we as humanity, I think, prefer, right? As long as what we're doing harms no other, there should be no restrictions to that. Is that a fair assessment of your position as an anarchist as well? Because that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good, safe introduction to anarchy. Usually people go for the do no harm card because it is safe. It's a good foundation for, and there's obviously a slight hypocrisy in the words we use, because if it's without ruler, then we assume that it's someone outside ourselves on the face of it. No ruler, you don't tell me what to do. Well, okay, who made the rule of do no harm? And then what constitutes a harm? So these are the obvious things that you dig into to analyze how strong that foundation of do no harm is, and it goes with everything we do, is that the words we use are usually vague and deserve to be investigated if they're important at a deeper level. So you'd really have to say, what is harm? What constitutes harm?
Another excellent point, right? I mean, because we use these terms so loosely, thinking that we understand the entirety of the concept, and yeah, it can lead to peril. It's just the idea that harm is something that we recognize, that we prefer to be without, right? Whether it be physical, psychological, emotional, financial, any of these things seem to be qualifiers of harm, right? Pain inflicted in some meaningful way. And if we use that as an axiom to treat others the way we wish to be treated, and conversely don't treat others the way we wouldn't want to be treated, that's a good launch point. It's a good foundation on the philosophy of anarchism, because it doesn't, to me, I understand it has the connotation of chaos, but that's not the manner in which I'm using the word. And we all can recognize preferable behavior uh, in regards to our environment, right? We don't want people to come up and punch us in the face, and we we recognize our not wanting that to happen to us as something that others wouldn't want to happen to them.
Yeah, it sort of reminds you of that saying, "Do unto others."
Yeah, for sure. I
Which
mean,
is I think that's pretty foundational, because like you said, like Jeff here just said, I don't think pain has to do with harm. Pain is a signal that something big picture is wrong and we need to attend to it. So that's a good point too. I mean, pain is a signal. I agree. If we really cut that down too, pain is a signal that is it's there for you to put your attention on. It's like a warning sign or whatever to go and analyze. And even a bodily pain. I don't know if any of you guys have done this, but if you do focus on the center of the pain, it's said, and this is like ancient stuff, it's said that you actually heal it, like a tension in the body heals. So I've been through pain, physical pain with motorcycling accidents and all kinds of things, and I've experimented with it, and there's something to it. There's something seems to be.
and it's sort of amusing because all of these words seem to be closely tied together: pain, harm, and they're all related to suffering, right? So you can be put under financial pain by being mandated at the point of a gun to give up a third of your earnings, right? These things all harm us in significant ways, and um, though we're trying to put a fine point on this concept, I think all of these words seem to convey the same action, right? Something that is a detriment to our existence, and and really affects how we react to that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously the physical aspects of violation, we'll use that word again, which relates to violence, violation, which is technically, to me anyway, it seems to be a representation of over-assertion. And an assertion is your equal with everybody else, any other person you're dealing with, or maybe even animal too, maybe, but let's not go there yet. That you, to push up to the assertion point is like a boundary in whatever you're acting out or saying, intent, up to a boundary that any further pushing beyond that boundary of assertion is a violation. So it's almost like violation is like a line in the sand that can be measured by maybe thought or discussion, Socratically, because these things are complex, and obviously for newcomers, Socratically is to question continually a subject to find its essence, find its truth.
Well, and when you say draw a line in the sand, doesn't that mean that, or doesn't it leave it open to that line being drawn in an arbitrary place? Because what what one finds acceptable, and they draw that line there, may be meters away from where a different person with different uh, levels of acceptability would draw their line, right? So
Yep.
it is drawing a line enough seeing as it can be so subject to arbitrary whim.
Well, could we add a word to the concept we're talking about, line in this, and could we call it boundaries? And so that makes us more in the realm of um, personal boundaries, like your ethical, maybe, or your religious, even, your concept of what you're willing to accept. And this is where it gets difficult, isn't it? Even on a personal level, everyone's got a certain level of offence, you could say, where someone you'll speak to in a certain way, maybe with a bit of humour, someone might get offended. And so you're crossing these boundaries with each other. And so, would that make sense? These are boundary issues that we have interpersonally. Everyone's got a different set of boundaries. And then you could say that boundary line with your actions, right, of speaking to someone or dealing with someone, is the line of assertion of the boundaries that are agreed to with the people involved. The boundaries that we agree to. So you could have a higher intelligent race maybe above these people going, ha ha ha, these people are amateurs. We've got boundaries that constitute more freedoms because we can express the ability to work in harmony with agreements to these boundaries that are more efficient and they work. So couldn't these ideas of, back to this anarchy thing of no ruler, be, as in a functional sense, the ability to get agreements with people to the boundaries that they'll accept, a kind of a contract as such that we, like the word says, it's contracting down into a box, but it's to have an agreement that can be altered, of course, but it would have to be addressed with each other. You know what I mean? Like, to start functioning with someone or people, we have to have some boundaries. Like, we're organising this group. We had to have some boundaries in place of how we're going to do it to make it work. And then as we get a feel for how things go, we can loosen the reins a bit and start to make new boundaries that are more freedom, I think that's possible. And so if that is the case, then why aren't we doing that as a society? As simple as that. Why aren't we focused on this whole concept of boundaries? What are they? How can we make more freedom, boundaries, without creating disharmony? Because the disharmony is the conflict, in a negative way. Conflict in a way of disagreement does not necessarily harm society. Just because you think a certain way or thing, and I think a different thing, but we both get no harm out of it, couldn't that be respected with each other? I respect your right to think your way and beliefs, and you respect mine, and no harm is evidenced.
Yeah, and I think it could be easily said that it's all about limiting coercion or lessening coercion or removing coercion altogether from our lives, right? Being mandated to do something, the threat of violence is, I can't see that to be preferable to anyone who enjoys their autonomy.
Well, isn't coercion just a form of manipulation?
Oh, yeah. Couldn't it be said that coercion is a form of manipulation with implied or acted upon violence, and without that violence looming over you, would that manipulation carry the same weight?
Yeah, a consequence. consequence of if you don't do what the manipulator has said. I mean, this is a really good topic in itself because, as some of you know, I've been right into studying narcissism, and really, that is the spiritual or mental manipulation of people just in general, government and just normal people, private people. What are these techniques of manipulation really? And there's many of them, as a lot of you guys that have looked at narcissism know. So, you know, there's so many parts to it, you know, deception, vagarity. And when you get into these manipulative things, if you bring up the word manipulation, which is definitely a big part of the grey area of freedom, you know, if you're trained to think in a certain way, i.e. not critically, which is the worst, then you won't ask these questions about subtle forms of manipulation. And by seeing the subtle forms of manipulation, you wake up to more subtle violations, you could call them. They're little violations, and they go under the radar because they're not forced upon you. You are led to participate. You know, this is the real art of manipulation. You're actually led to participate is the first thing. So if you could tell at that first little side of manipulation, the leading you into interest even, if you catch it there, if you see the nastiness there, then you've won, because you're not even going to jump into the damn thing in the first place. But everything from there is, once you've been manipulated, i.e. you don't understand what's being done around you or said to you or offered to you, then if you just go along with it, then that's dangerous in itself, isn't it? If it's not important, could it become important? Because if it's not important, who cares? Someone's trying to manipulate me and they don't even know me, and I think, whatever. You know, so what? Is that important? No. So could a vague thing become important? Only if if it's presented as important, then is it important? Just because someone says it's important, how do you really know? So there's a manipulation in itself. Panic. Here, cry wolf, you know? And so the person puts their interest on it, and they're already halfway sucked in. This is what's going on with the lockdown. You know, we don't quite know what's happening. There's something not quite right. There's too much vagarities. And so we deserve answers, eh? Otherwise, forget it. You know, should that be a rule? But this is why anarchy is so deep, because, you know, you're really talking at these subtle forms of manipulation. And if the people are ignorant to it, if they don't understand techniques of manipulation, then they'll find themselves in a lockdown, psychologically at least, where they can't quite figure out how they even got there. Then they think, I'm an anarchist, you know. What are you doing to me? But you've kind of already gotten involved in it, you know. So anarchy, in my opinion, is a very deep declogging and a de-brainwashing. You know, you turn into a critical thinker that is aware that, well, as a critical thinker, wouldn't that give you compassion for your fellow man? I would say yes.
Well, and it reminds me of H.L. Mencken quote, and if the audience isn't aware of who he was a science fiction author, but he's been quoted saying some rather profound things, and one thing that I think really ties into all this is the urge to save humanity is always a false front for the urge to rule, right? And we've been told this urgency of, you know, lockdown, social distancing, think of the babies, this is for your safety. I mean, oh the humanity. And under that guise, they've implemented, everyone just abandoning rule of law, and, and and letting these things run ruckshot across their populace. We live in different nations, but it seems to be manifesting in the exact same manner, right? They're telling us what we can and can't do and how we should live, and I get the idea that this is a contagious disease, and there are dangers associated with it, but the urgency is is sort of quelling out this anarchistic thought as well, right? Because we all want to be free. Deep down, I believe that we see that as being preferable, not being coerced into doing one thing or another, and um, it ties in because I think the powers that should not be have noticed that um, people have, as of late, in my observation, become more and more anarchistic, right? They've and I may just be talking in echo chambers, and my buddies are all just too like-minded for me to see a major difference. Um, but it seems to be squashing that idea that let's be free of mandate, and give that up for the sake of the greater good or whatever that might entail.
Anyone else want to chime in with anything? Yeah, well, I mean, this man, you use the word mandate. So the mandate really is, just a plan, and we all agree to it, or someone agrees to it. You can have your own mandate for your own life. But we talk about this heaps. The group thing is that as soon as you get into a group, the whole dynamic changes. If you all agree to a mandate, then you're lockstep in the mandate, and that's not a bad thing always. But if the people aren't conscious that it can get out of hand, as we see through history, then it'll keep repeating. Which could be based on the danger of a hierarchy would be the first corruption, in my opinion. That any group that gets together with their mandate, if they can at least understand how the leader should be, if there is a leader, how should he be? How is he a dictator? Should he just dictate and you not ask questions?
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, I, as an anarchist, I'm not averse to voluntary hierarchies, right? If someone has a better understanding or knowledge, and I trust the veracity of their claims to some degree, I'm willing to follow their lead, right? And I also reserve the right to disassociate anytime that that lead becomes unacceptable to my sensibilities. So, as much as I think you're vilifying hierarchies in general, I think we need to put the qualifier of involuntary and voluntary in front of this hierarchy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And wouldn't that though start in the mind? Like if there is a leader in a group, and he's the druid or the guru, and he's the one that will go away into his tent and go and think about it, and then come back and address the people, then wouldn't it be a good idea for that leader to come back even Socratically, and say, well, what do you guys think? This is what I've come up with. And technically that's like voting again, though, isn't it? Which, I mean, if you've got a group of people, is that good? Is voting, I mean, And then, obviously, and we've talked about this, because we live in a family unit from birth, that's a group. And you're going to probably have a hierarchy in there because the father knows more than the son. And therefore, can there be anarchy in the family? Can the family unit be an anarchistic unit? And if it could, then isn't that the model for the community?
Well, I think it very easily can be anarchistic, right? Because even though the father knows more than the child, their job is not necessarily to rule them; it's to be stewards of them and protect them from harms that they may not be aware of. However, um, in this fostering of a young person, um, agency needs to be reserved, right? I don't know how much you've looked into peaceful parenting and how it might go against um, convention, right? Because everyone speaks of um, learning how to think critically. And I'm of the mind that critical thought is an innate characteristic of humanity, and we've from birth in one way or another had that stymied, right? A a child is insatiably curious, and they're critical of their environment and want to know what makes the world tick. And you know, parents, due to exhaustion of running the rat race or just not having the answer, um, can oftentimes, I've witnessed, end up saying, well, because I said so, right? Rather than respecting the agency of the child and saying, well, let's look at it. Why shouldn't you stick your finger in a light socket, right? Not to say that it should be encouraged and let them learn for themselves why we shouldn't do this, but take the time and explain. So I don't see that antithetical to anarchism, right? I think that that's an excellent example of how you cannot rule someone, but lead them gently into the direction of um, a rounded, respectful little person, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there is a massive uh, correlation between the family unit and the child and the people in the society. Like that George Bernard Shaw quote, um, that people don't grow up, or they never grow up, they just learn to behave in the society. And then you get the Plato quotes and all the leaders throughout history, or technocrats in history, or, social scientists of history. And they look at us as children. So technically the public person or persona or people are treated like children, especially today, especially the way that we're talked down to in the media and mocked even. So there's a big correlation with this whole thing, that goes right through to birth, the parenting, and right through to you coming out and doing that. And it's more than likely not by chance that it's happened that way.
Yeah, and oh, sorry.
How would a person be held accountable for negative actions in a community such as you're speaking?
Can you say that again?
Yes, how would a person be held accountable for negative actions in a community and or a structure such as you are speaking of?
So you mean to say that if someone harmed another person, not went out the boundaries and touched the plug and got electrocuted, oh, he hurt himself. Well, there's his karma there. There's his justice there. But are you talking about if someone harms another person, what would the justice be?
Yes. What if someone harmed someone else or took from someone else? How would that be dealt with within a voluntary or anarchist community?
Yeah, well, I mean, the nearest thing I can go to there in my mind would be like the original Constitution, like in the US, where um, you have the right to defend your property. See, so if you, well, this is only one idea, though, of course, but if you have good protection, like you have some, maybe insurance, you have alarms, and you have your place locked down, and you have your things locked down, then that's obviously not harming anyone. So that's a good idea. It's a good idea overall because that says responsibility too. You know how we talk, or many have said before, freedom and responsibility are synonymous. Can't have one without the other. So that's the whole theme of freedom, is self-responsibility. So if you have property that is valuable, especially to you, you have to look after it. So why would you depend on someone to guard it for you? And if you did, then, well, and you're rich, say, and you hired a guard to guard it for you, well, that's just like an alarm. You're paying a guy by the hour to guard your shit. And he will kill you if you give you warning. Maybe teach kids due process. I think due process is a great idea. It's a fantastic idea. It's a fundamental. That's why it came into society as a mechanism, of warning. All it is a warning. Here's a warning. If you do it again, then this is going to happen.
Well,
so I don't see any problem with that at all.
Yeah, and all right, let's take a kid on a playground. And we can scale this up to different things, but let's just take this for instance. So a kid takes a squirt bottle and starts squirting a kid that doesn't want to be squirted, right? So the prudent thing to do in this scenario would be the kid that didn't want to be squirted, go get something to squirt him back with, and then be like, if you get to do something to me that I don't like, then I get to do something to you that you don't like. So if we scale it up to say somebody steals from someone, and without a doubt we know who the thief is, I'm not saying necessarily an eye for an eye, but like Jeff C said here in the text chat, right? The victim is made whole by the person causing the harm. And how does that happen? It depends to a great degree depending on the scenario. But say somebody steals from me, and the whole community knows that this person stole from me. The whole community, I believe, would be acceptable for me either regaining my property, or if that was already sold off, taking something of equal value, but not greater, from the thief, right? It's about making the victim whole. And I don't think that violence necessarily is the answer for all of these things. Violence is easy. Anyone can do violence. It's taking the time and figuring out a solution to where the victim walks away feeling whole.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yep.
And seeing as we're in this anarchistic community, everyone within that community would recognize that personal responsibility is paramount, right? And there need not be an alleviation of onus to come to an agreeable solution. Not to say that that's not an option as well, right? We can, like Cliff said, we can hire security guards to protect our property when we're not there because we, I don't want to say covet, but we want to retain our things, right? And we don't want people to steal them in our absence. And whether or not we have a security force we all get together and form a police force, right? There's no impunity to that, right? And it's not against anarchistic principles to have a police force. What is against anarchistic principles is for that police force to act with impunity and have a monopoly on violence, right? Because in this anarchistic community's police force, they are directly beholden to their constituents. There's no legal mumbo jumbo that can excuse a policeman shooting someone in the back that wasn't intending to harm them, right? There's no justification for being a judge, jury, and executioner out in the field. It just wouldn't be deemed as acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah, but it does get complex. I mean, all of these things are ideals, you know, again, you know, these concepts of things that we technically already have in our system. You know, deep down, we still have ideas of what justice is, you know. And we do see it manifest even within the system as well. It's not, you know, I've seen a lot of good happen in the last 10, 15 years. You know, there's a lot of bad too. And we see bad people getting arrested. We see a lot of bad people getting away. We see a lot of things that don't make sense too. So the sad thing is that the situation we find ourselves in, of course, is, and I've got this Machiavelli quote here, where he says, power is the pivot on which everything hinges. Right? Power is the pivot on which everything hinges. He who has the power is always right, and he that is the weaker is always wrong. And so what is power in its essence is knowledge. You know, according to John Dee. Oh no, not John Dee. Francis Bacon. That was, I think he said that. And analytics is knowledge, and knowledge is power, and power is control. And that could be personal knowledge and personal power and personal control, right? So we can demonstrate that that is a factor. And so and this is what the position that we're in, you know, I can see it very clearly, and that is that the people that have formed a group, let's just say that the world is in anarchy now, because technically we are, if we discuss it, we're in anarchy. And we try and slip in justice where we can with records and all that stuff. But the real power brokers in the world, they control all this. They know all this. They know all this, right? They understand it. It's like a little doll's house to them. They've got their little courts and their military units and everything. The whole thing's a stage show, you could say. And they know all this. So they have more power because they have more knowledge. And so this is why it's hard for people to wake up, is that the true anarchists, you could say, they're even called revolutionaries, right? These Jesuits even, which are right up there, in the action of the global elites. You know, the Illuminati word, this Illuminati, is the Jesuits. That is what they are. They're the Jesuit military priests. And then military comes in hard there, because beyond politics is military. Beyond politics is military. Politics is an after effect of military. So military is, from the top, a highly critical, watchful eye, of course, you know, represented by Horus. It probably was the same back then in Egypt. And they just watch, collect data, and act militarily on all levels. I personally think the word military is to do with measurement, mil, because you get mils. So military is really the steady, measured encroachment for more control, which is more power, because these things are interrelated. So in any society of human beings, it would seem, based on at least the Anglo-Saxon dominatrix that we have today, is the intelligent overall will rise to the top, because they'll be able to give you what you want to get what they want. For instance, this whole commerce thing, this business thing, the whole world is run on business, which is contracts, right? And commerce, that's all it is. It's agreements that we make. So they have to sell us with the power of knowledge and all the rest of it. They have to steer the people's minds. And a lot of people accept it, as you can see. So they're cutting it fine. They're certainly manipulating. They're certainly gaslighting. And vagarities are everywhere. Vague terms and double think and double speak that the people accept willingly, right, without too much critical thinking. Obviously, now the pressure's on. People are thinking more critically. You can't do anything anymore, right? You can't even leave your home. And how long is that going on for,
Well, Frederick Bastiat said, when plunder becomes a way of life, men create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it, right? So how do we shirk this despotism? I think a lot of people believe that electing the right politician will do it. And a lot of people think riots or protesting or owning guns or having a civil war or a revolution or being nationalistic or some altcoin cryptocurrency, these things are all a means to shirk that despotism. But at the end of the day, as long as everyone believes that this political authority is legitimate, nothing will ever change, right? It doesn't, even if we rise up in arms and fight back against this despotism, that idea that political authority is real is just going to keep rearing its ugly head, and it'll just be iteration after iteration, and we get what we've always got because we keep doing what we've always done.
Yep. And we're doing what we've always done fundamentally is, adapt with the system that we're born into. Isn't that the pivoting point on the problem? Is that, what do we do? Well, we do what the media tells us to do. Because remember that the media is absolutely crucial for people in this day and age to get their head around on how big it's controlled, on its techniques of control, and that in fact it really is manipulative. And that's a big danger because it permeates through all the other little tidbits that people do. They'll go to the bookstore or something. All the books will be all pretty much in the same ballpark of your culture, of your trend of the day, which is a collective idea. And then any of these collective ideas that are pulled apart and gone back to where they originated, you'll find the same people behind it, or paid off people behind it. So, that's what we're dealing with today. And how long has that been going on for? Hey, how long is it? Because this whole technique of media, which is, again, the middlemen, which is really technically, this de facto government, they're just middlemen. Even the Pope, right? He's a vicar of Christ. Vicar is one who stands in for. He's standing between you and God, so to speak, which could be your mind, right? If you analyze what is God, or how does a man understand what God is, well, isn't it start in your mind? And so they're standing in for your mind. They're telling you that, from thousands of years ago, which is true, And that's why people wake up is they think something's not right. It's too scripted. You know, like those of you that have seen The Truman Show, classic occultic movie. You know, The Truman Show. Go and check it out. How when he nearly wakes up, his buddy turns up with a beer. Hey, buddy, have a beer. Come on, sit down. Hey, it's all right. We all go through this and all that stuff. And they're all actors in a play. All being paid too. You know, so whether they know it or not, they're part of what's going on and getting paid for it. Today they had in the media, this is a funny thing I remember, he didn't put his name. It was a journalist in one of the local rags. And he would have been the same guy that was saying, "Oh, you know, we should lock down. We must comply. We must do this. Don't think, just do it." And then today in the local rags, it's saying, and this is a mainstream governed propaganda piece. And now the journalist is saying, "Oh, what are you guys doing? This has now turned into a police state." Isn't it amazing how everyone complied? This is a journalist that yesterday said, "Oh my God, you better comply." You know, so this is ridiculous. What are they trying to do? That's how they're agitating you. This is the double think straight away. On one hand, you've got to comply. On the other hand, oh no, this is what the fuck. See, double. They go left, right, and people just go along with it.
And Plato brought up a pretty scary point, right? The heaviest penalty for declining to rule is to be ruled by someone inferior than yourself.
Yeah, yourself being, you know, a good connection to a higher intelligence. I mean, you know, this is why is anarchy or individualism or to think for oneself? Why is it so important? You know, well, isn't that the whole connection you truly have? You know, your whole intelligence, what we call intelligence. Isn't that all you can rely upon? Really? You know, there's nothing else. Everything you deal with outside your world is unsure. I mean, you can be unsure, but you are you. You know, you're not going anywhere. Your mind is turned on. You know, so it's so important. There's nothing. Everything else is unsure. It's someone's idea, someone's opinion, and we're limited by communication in some ways because of the words put us in a box, you know, which could be double meaning and all that stuff. Maybe our true communication is psychic. Maybe we as humans have the ability to communicate more psychically, and this has been beaten out of us, and that a psychic communication is more truthful, and that because they gave us all this other stuff, way of communicating, you know, it could be that, you know, in some ways, because, you know, like you get a feeling from someone, you know, someone's vibe. That's not speaking. That's you talking to yourself about someone's energy, and they're probably thinking about you too. Same thing. So yeah, we just there's no doubt humans lack knowledge, even though that we have this massively complex world, and it seems like we have everything. When you go and knock on a doctor's door and say, "Hey, we're in the year 2020. Why is the stomach cancer or whatever still not resolved? Or some other basic disease. Why isn't this resolved? Isn't it true that this will work?" And they say, "Yeah, it actually does." And they go, I don't know why. This is a modern health system, and they're throwing their hands up at something basic. So, and we all know there's alternative remedies that actually work. And I'm not saying all the remedies that are out there all, you know, gosh, some of it's all bullshit too. And a lot of it's placebo, you know. This lockdown is definitely, you know, conspiratorial or not, it has a massive psychological effect. Hey, on everybody. You, whether you like it or not, are now being trained to change your behavior. That's the problem. And then we get into a new normal through behavior modification. Pavlov's dog. Hey.
Yeah, and you turned me on to this last year, that learned hand quote, right? Liberty lies in the hearts of men. Once it dies there, no constitution, no court, no law can save it. And
Yeah.
it seems like there's a sad trend of unwavering uh, obedience to government right now. Right? Is anyone being critical of what they might be doing while they're distracting us with this whole COVID thing, and how this may be a litmus test for how far they can go and how willing people are to bow to some threat or fear or hobgoblin, right? And back to Macon, the whole aim of practical politics is to menace society with an endless line of hobgoblins, um, all of them imaginary, for the sole goal of to lead the populace to be clamorous, to be led to safety, right? And that's so scary, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've been thinking the same thing. I mean, on the face of it, these do-gooders, that are control freaks, really. Remember, obviously, we're in a situation where an ideology is shoved down your throat under the guise of threat of violence, or incarceration or whatever. This is ideology. And maybe sometime we should go into what is right, just Socratically try and strip down what is right, because you'll find that a lot of stuff we take for granted on what will work and what isn't. And a lot of people stick to the system even though it is unstable. It's always been unstable. Even if I look back on through my life as a child, it was still unstable back then too. So this idea of some kind of form of control is what people seek. This is why they worship government, to get the surety of stability. But it never works that way. There's always instability. And then, of course, we look into who is the government? What's behind the government? What is the crown? What is the bank? All that stuff. You get into all that, and it gets esoteric. And it gets into, I kid you not, if you research it yourself, it gets into that these people are revolutionaries. They agitate anyway. So you're actually supporting agitation, which is destroying your peace of mind, right? At least. So once people see that, it's game over. But most won't see that because it's too far a jump. They have to go and do the research. I had no clue what I was dealing with until I absolutely am sure that's what they're doing. They're revolutionaries, legalistic. The communism goes through the court system. The modern Bretton Woods commercial court systems we have in the world today are based on communism. So, yeah, how many people know that? That's how deep it goes. That's how deep this subtle, manipulative agenda goes. It permeates absolutely everything. And so, and it's so strange because some of what is the system is good and works, as little tools. Banks are neutral. I've said that for years. Banks are neutral. It's kind of like the art of war. Don't fight. The banks don't fight. They know that. They just sit there and collect. The judge doesn't fight, right? He rules for the bank. He just collects on your arguments. Look into narcissism and the subtle manipulation that provokes you into an argument that causes the charge that gets you ended up in court. You're nabbing, you're biting down on their manipulation. That's how subtle it is. Get you to react and then go, oh, look at him, he's crazy. Well, they keep a cool head, and they just poked you in the arm with a vaccine.
It's for your safety has been the motivation for so many things, right? It won't be long till they're telling us to get on the train because it's for our safety at the rate we're going, right? It's no longer just confined to some Nazi rhetoric, it seems to encompass the whole globe at this point.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It's so we're going to have to end soon because the hour's coming up. I don't like to do too much more than an hour because people have to do other things. I think today's gone really well. I quite like the dialogue, OG. It's quite good. And maybe next time more can participate. I hope you guys like what we're talking about and you benefit from it somehow. But yeah, I'd just like to say that it is there's no doubt in my mind that the opportunists. It's like George Soros. You go and look up George Soros and look at him for a week on YouTube. Even you'll hear his interviews and that you'll see his technique. He's an opportunist, and that's a deep thing because an opportunist could see an opportunity for agitation and go, "Oops." And now he's just created something. See what I mean? So they're very subtle in what they do. And the intent could be evil. So I don't disagree with people that say they're evil. It could definitely be, a very disrespectful thing to do. Like why not help the situation rather than help it fall to profit off it? But these people, and I put a link on all the videos I did on one of the videos we did a while back, and it was a link to moral, or even in the comments I put it on my YouTube channel, and it's called Moral Entrepreneur. Moral Entrepreneur. So they try and dictate what morals are, what's right, in other words, virtue, and they look for opportunities to capitalize and take you to court to say, I've got more moral right than you. That's definitely what they're doing. Look at it in even this lockdown they're doing. They're trying to make a just overall situation that people agree to. And they'll probably make money off it. They'll probably make money off this shit as it's going down. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Cliff, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk with you on this channel. And I believe if people find value in this, we can continue this. And it's definitely been a pleasure. I wish there was a little more engagement from the little audience we have here, but there'll be some growing pains in doing this. And I'm sure we'll find a more comfortable groove. I appreciate everyone that listened and did contribute. I think there's so much to unpack, and we're also limited in our experience that maybe in this journey we can make that a little easier for other people.
Yep. So, having said that, thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of it, and we'll see you next time. I might do one a week, one every couple of weeks. We all get busy. There might be a few more because we're all on lockdown. So, we'll just see how we go and take it easy out there. Use this time for studying up on things, is always good. Try and use the lockdown positively, constructively. And we'll always win if we have that attitude because